Hey everyone, this is Mike and today I am back with another learning how to tank E7s vs Savage video, this time E7 Savage. And this one, again, only 1 or 2 pulls I think that we had in order to clear this one, so not everything is perfect. Yesterday I had someone asking me whether or not I could use a clean POV to do these videos instead, but that's kind of not really the purpose of why I'm making these videos. I want to make these videos to kind of show you what my first thoughts were going into these fights, what I did right, what I did wrong, learning from my mistakes and that kind of stuff. That's kind of the purpose of these videos, so that I can learn from my mistakes, you can learn from my mistakes, and then so that you don't repeat those when you go into Party Finder or something like that. So that's why there's not necessarily going to be clean kills in this. Of course, I also don't have more clears than this either. Like, I only have 1 clear on all of the fights on Gunbreaker so far, so I just don't have a clean POV just yet. So yeah, that's kind of to address that. Now, when it comes down to this fight on a tank, it's really not that different from doing it on any other job, because most of the mechanics that you're going to be doing here are uniform amongst all of the different jobs that you have in the game. Of course, there are a couple of unique things that you have to do as a tank, but not really that many really. The main thing that you're going to be doing is, of course, taking these tank busters. The way me and my party handle them is by using our invulns on them if we can. If not, then of course we need to share these, because I believe that the tank buster works exactly the same as it did in O12 Savage, Final Omega, the second phase, not the MNF phase. Where the first one inflicts a vulnerability debuff and the second one will deal less damage, but will kill you if you have that vulnerability debuff, and then someone needs to stand in front of it to block the damage, so to speak. Now, we're not entirely sure if that's exactly how it works, because you can also share it with the party. Does that mean that you can technically have like the party stand in front? Is it like a shared damage marker with like the more people you have, the less damage it will do or something like that? I'm not 100% sure. The way that my party or my static has always handled it is always just doing it with the 2 tanks. Invuln it if possible. If you can't invuln it, then just have the other tank stand in front of you with some cooldowns. And use some cooldowns yourself as well, by the way, if you're the initial target. And then just do it that way, because other than that we don't really need to use our cooldowns anywhere in this fight. I would just say, if you're going with the same principle of using the invulns for it, basically just roll your cooldowns for auto attacks. I don't do it in this fight, not much at least. I do use it here or there. Because I wasn't 100% sure, because of course I don't know exactly when these tank busters happen. As you can see, our paladin here gonna use Hallowed Ground, but usually like you'll have enough cooldowns, and I also don't think this hits super hard either. So if you just say, for example, you're 30% for it, you should be just fine. Now, when it comes down to actual tank mechanics, I think the only thing that you really have to worry about in this fight is the ad phase, because that's really where you have the most responsibility as a tank. It also depends, because by the way, if you don't use your invulns for the tank busters, then you're most likely going to be saving them for the second phase, which is where you can do some cool stuff with your invulns as well. And I'm going to accidentally kill my paladin here, by the way. What happened here is basically I was supposed to go a little bit more towards the back. I do try to run out, but I was a little bit too late, and because he had a little bit less HP than I did, he ended up dying, I ended up surviving. So Aurora, my apologies if you end up watching this. But yeah, basically it's mainly the second phase where you can do some cool stuff with your invulns. We decide to do everything the standard way, I guess you could say, without using those invulns. So that's why we use our invulns on the tank busters, but you'll see that when we get there, and I'll talk about that a little bit right there as well. Now, when it comes down to the ad phase, that's finally where you get to do some actual tanking, because of course the boss only really cares about aggro. The boss is not going to be moving or anything like that, and there's not really many things you can do as a tank to change the first phase and the second phase really. When it comes down to positioning, the kind of stuff, because of course the boss is not going to be moving. Now, over here you have 2 main responsibilities. First of all, you need to make sure that this thing gets interrupted. Very important. Of course, if you are a ranged physical DPS, you can also interrupt it, just to make sure, like for example, if your tank was to forget or something like that, that you make sure that that thing gets interrupted, because otherwise you probably are going to be wiping. And then of course, gotta make sure that you keep spinning. Either you're going to be going clockwise or counterclockwise. It depends on how the, the blasphemy is going to be running around. And then of course you just need to make sure that all of the different bosses stay far enough away from each other. Our Est is going to be doing a 360 no-scope here, I think, and going to fly towards the other side of the map. But we're all used to that at this point. She always flies to the other side, or of the map, depends. But yeah, so other than this, ad phase, not really too special over here. You just keep rotating it around in a circle, either clockwise or counterclockwise. Do gotta make sure here that you're on the right ad, so to speak, so you don't get hit by the donut. or by the chariot. Well, we keep calling it donut and chariot because of the nail fight. But yeah, basically, don't get hit by that AoE. Now, as a gunbreaker, I'm going to be saving 1 stack here, so that I can basically have 1 extra cartridge to spend on the reopener, in case, like, I, for example, wanted to use a potion right there or something like that. Not going to be doing that here, because, of course, it is weeklies, and we don't really care about our damage during weeklies. As long as we kill the fight, it is fine for us. And then, of course, we also have our LB3s that we are going to be using for our healers. So we really don't care about getting a good kill time or anything like that. Now, if you ended up saving your invulns as the tanks, then you're most likely going to be using them on this mechanic and the one that comes after. So something that you can do here is, if as a tank you still have your invulns available here, you can go all the way to the front and basically get both of these line markers on you. Meaning that, as for example with Paladin, it's a really good one. You can use your hallowed ground and take no damage from this, meaning that your healers don't have to heal here. So that's a really cool thing that you can do for optimization. Another thing you can do here is, as a tank, have all of these, like the thing I'm tethered to right now, you can have all 4 of these tethered onto you, and you can use your invuln for that as well. Again, saving a lot of damage from hitting on you, because of course the towers don't do as much damage as, for example, these fists flying through the arena. We ended up having some people die here. I'm not entirely sure what ended up happening there. Our Paladin gonna die again here because he was closest to the thing when it spawned. And of course, because of the heal LB3, he couldn't move away from it, and that is why he ended up dying here again. I have a couple people die here. Definitely not a clean run, but we end up doing these mechanics the normal way, the way I explained them, how you should do them in the E7 guide way back when that came out. But usually you can also use your tank invuln there basically if you want to make this mechanic a little bit easier, so people don't have to think. Of course, the mechanic definitely isn't hard enough for you to need to like use the invuln to cheese it, because otherwise it would be too difficult or something like that. Definitely not the case. But it makes things a little bit easier. Now, when it comes down to this mechanic, the way that I explained it in my E7s guide, I made it seem like a very difficult mechanic where you have to like pay attention to a lot of stuff that is going on. But the only thing you really have to care about is about the first portals that spawn. As you can see, I'm not even going to look at the portals anymore, because on the first initial swap of the portals, you know what's gonna happen. Either you always stay on the same tile if you just paid enough attention, or you can rewind a little bit as well. I'm basically going to be standing on that B tile for the entire duration of the mechanic, outside of baiting that one, like the one AoE marker more towards the middle. I'm gonna be invulning this one again. So either you always stand on the same tile, or you're always going to be alternating, and it depends on the first portals that spawn. So if you see that, for example, the first portals are going to be exactly the same, you're always alternating. If the first portals swap, then you always stay on the same tile. I believe it works that way. So it's really easy to basically keep track of that, and then you don't even have to think about the mechanic entirely anymore. You just remember, either I always swap, or either I always stay on the same tile. And then we go into the final phase. Again, this doesn't really have anything to do when it comes down to tanking. Me and the co-tank start on the south side, so that we both have a different color. Tanks always have different colors. We end up doing this for our tanks, so that our healers are with the group. You can also do it the other way around. You can have your tanks with the 2 groups, and then your healers start south. That's totally up to you, because tanks will always have a different color, and healers will always have a different color as well. And you basically need that for the south orbs to work, because then you're always going to have 2 different colors at this point, and then it doesn't matter what the 3rd color is that spawns. You'll always have one of the 2 tanks being able to grab this, or one of the 2 healers, depending on which one you choose. And then after this, we all just run south, because that is our stack point that we have predetermined. Dodge all of the different colors, and then just mitigate through the AoEs, and then that is pretty much the end of the fight. So E7 as a tank, pretty easy fight to do. You only really need to think about the tank buster, which is different than if you were to play as a DPS, for example. Of course, you also have the fists during the towers / fists phase. We call it fist because of O11 Savage, Omega, because of it were basically fists back then, and these are pretty much exactly the same as the fists from Omega back then. They look a little bit different because they're of course like the paper planes, or whatever you can call them, the birds. But that's kind of why we call them that way. So that's the only real difference between mechanics that you have to take care of. And then of course you have the tank busters, but since we invuln them, the tank busters are really easy to take care of. In this case, in this clear, we end up being able to invuln all of the tank busters, and then depending of course on who gets targeted where, you might have to share it with the other tank. And then of course, if you don't have to share them, you can use your cooldowns to just mitigate auto attacks. But yeah, that's going to be E7 Savage, relatively simple fight. I still think that they should switch E7 and E6, they should have been the other way around, and then make E6 a little bit harder or something like that. But yeah, that's pretty much going to be it for this video. So I want to thank you for watching, I want to thank my Patreons for supporting me, and I'll see you in the next one.